So good morning, everyone. Thank you very much to be with us to these Athena talks in collaboration with the ITEM, Pythagoras, and Math Digger projects. All of these projects, they have a main focus how to improve teaching. One of the main topics is like how to teach mathematics. We have here also the coordinator of the Pythagoras project, Professor Sofonea Daniel Florin, and also my colleagues, George Kavoulakis, George Fouskitakis, and Nicolas Petrakis, that we organize all these events, and also Professor Lore Barthel from the ITEM project from Hadassah College in Israel, among other participants. We are very glad to have together, to have with us this Thursday, Associate Professor Maria Meehan. Maria is an Associate Professor in Mathematics in the University College in Dublin, Ireland. She has a PhD in pure mathematics, but however, her main research activity recently is very much focused in mathematics education at the university level. She is the head of teaching and learning in the School of Mathematics and Statistics in the respective university, University College in Dublin. She has received 2 university teaching awards, so I think that she will reveal a lot of tips how to improve our teaching. Through her experience, her work has received more than 2,000 citations, and today's talk is entitled The University Mathematics Lecture. To record or not to record, that is the question. Reminds me something, this kind of phrase. Maria, thank you very much to be with us, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, I'll share my screen if that's all right.
Yeah, please place it in full screen.
Yeah, there we go. Okay.
Thank you very much, Maria, and I love your Irish accent.
Yes, it is. So I'm the Irish Maria. So thank you very much, Kostas, for that introduction, and thanks for inviting me. It's great to be able to do this. So Irish people always talk about the weather. It's what we do. So the weather here, it's just sun starting to come up. It's 0 degrees. We're going through a bit of a cold patch this week, but tomorrow it's due to get milder, be about 4 or 5 degrees. The rain will come in again. So that's our little bit. We always greet each other with like a comment about the weather. So as Kostas said, I've been teaching for quite some time. I've been lecturing maths for 27 years, and I've been working in University College Dublin for 25 years. And my initial research was in pure maths, but I think actually it was a conference in Crete I went to in 2002 that I first in university maths education, and I just thought, this is really, I love this area. This is something I'm interested in. And I think one of the things you'll see today is that while my maths research was in a very pure area with kind of no I wasn't interested in the applications. In maths education, my research is very much prompted by what I'm seeing in practice. So I feel it's really quite practical. And a lot of the problems I look at stem from my own practice. And I want to interrogate my practice and find out how things work. So that's kind of where we're at. So just to, there we go. So in case you're not familiar with Ireland, UCD is, UCD is in Dublin, where the little yellow star is here, and we're just south of the city, and we're very, very close to the Irish Sea, so that's very nice. My accent, you wouldn't know this. I'm actually up here in the northwest in Donegal, just right on Donegal Bay, off the Atlantic Ocean. So very different if you're on the west coast, you're exposed to the Atlantic Ocean, lovely, beautiful scenery. And actually, if anybody's interested in Star Wars, part of the latest Star Wars movies were filmed up at the very, very top of Malin Head. The Millennium Falcon lands up there at the top. So beautiful scenery, but really quite wild. So what I want to talk about today is, I have 2 studies here, but I think I may just talk about the first one. And if I say anything about the second one, it's really just, I want to touch on it. And then I'd like to kind of sum up where we're at now. So one of the big things that came out of COVID is obviously we all had to teach online. And then as we moved back to in-person teaching, our university said, well, you know, there's still a lot of the virus around, so we would like everybody to record their lectures, because students may not be able to come in, staff may not be able to come in, and most people did that. But then as we transitioned further and the university said, okay, now we really are back on campus. So this was particularly last September. We are now back properly on campus. A lot of staff actually asked the administration to ban the recording of videos. So can you come out and say there will be no recordings whatsoever? Whereas the students were doing the exact opposite, and they were saying, but we want recordings. Will you record your lecture? Will you record your lecture? Now, the thing is that I had been using video and recordings in my lectures way back, so probably for 10 years. So I was a little bit, because I think that they really have a place, and I kind of suppose I want to talk to you about this Maths for Business module that I taught, and I taught it for a very long time. But I thought this might be of interest to you because I see some of you are in engineering. So our service modules, they're modules where we teach maths to students whose main degree is not maths. So maths for engineers, maths for business, maths for computer science. And these are generally taken by students in first year, and they generally have very big classes, well, very big for us. So this class would have about 550 students in it. And because it's not for maths majors, those who take it have a very wide achievement in mathematics before they come in. So we can have really super excellent students who are really good at maths, or you could have students who really their prior maths is not that good. So all of our Irish students must study maths till the age of 18, up until the end of high school, and they all take a terminal exam then, which is offered at 2 levels. So I'd like to talk you through kind of the evolution. So this happened over a number of years, and I think that's important to remember. You don't just flip your teaching, or flip's the wrong word, switch your teaching overnight. Then I might just touch on study 2, and then I'll sort of sum up. So my motivation for this video study came from around 2011-12, so over 10 years ago. Myself and some colleagues started to do a little professional development project amongst ourselves. And we've used John Mason from the UK. He has written a book called The Discipline of Noticing. And he talks about writing little accounts, short accounts, say after your lectures, and then sharing those with others and discussing your practice in that way. So I was engaged in this little project at the time, and I was teaching Maths for Business. Now, the way I would normally teach it is I might show some techniques at the front of the lecture, and then I'll stop and I'll say, okay, here's a problem. I would like everybody to try this problem. And then I would walk around the lecture. Now, I can't see everybody, obviously, but I would stop and I would talk to maybe 10, 15 students, look at their work, see how they were getting on, and sort of test how it was going. So here's one of the accounts that I wrote, and I'll read it out. So the content is calculus mainly, 1 and 2 variable, and we do a little bit of matrices, simultaneous equations. But on this particular time, I was looking at optimization functions of 2 or more variables. So I said, today I finished the section on finding maximums and minimums. This is my 4th lecture on the topic. I have covered 9 examples in total, all using the same method. I put up last year's exam question. It's very similar to the one I did last Tuesday. And I walk around the lecture theatre. So one student I come to, he has a blank page in front of him. He tells me he doesn't know what to do. So I ask him if he was at last Tuesday's lecture, and he says no. And I'm getting pretty annoyed, engagement, and I walk away. I go to 2 more students, and it's the same thing. 4 lectures in, 9 examples in, I don't know what to do. I wasn't here. And you can say, well, okay, it's their own fault. They haven't been coming to class. But there's a little part of me that says, what is the point in me going right back down to the front of the theatre and moving on when I know there are people up there who have not got a clue what I have just been doing? And I suppose I left it there. There was a number of these episodes over the semester. But then as I was about to teach the module the following September, I took out all my accounts and I read them in one sitting. And suddenly I was like, oh my goodness, this is what's happening. I'm asking them to do things. They're not attending. I see that they don't know what to do. I get annoyed. They don't know what to do, but I feel I can't move on. So I said, right, here's what I need to do. When I'm doing worked examples, because this course is really quite procedural in nature. So it's not like the maths courses I would teach that really focus a lot more on concepts and theorems and proofs. So it's quite procedural. So I said, very much, you must come to class. Everybody must come to lectures if they want to learn. But that I would do very short videos, 5-6 minutes, of worked examples. And I was really clear that the idea was to complement the live lecture. So not replace it, absolutely not. These were additional examples and they would complement the live lecture. And I felt at least then, if I walked around and I came across students who hadn't been to class, I could say, I've up a short video. Why don't you watch it? I think you'd find it helpful. I wouldn't get annoyed and they would have a means by which to study, which to catch up. Now, the thing was that year, and I wrote a little conference paper on it there at the end, I was looking at we had Blackboard at the time, the virtual learning environment, and I was looking at the hits on the videos. And I was utterly shocked at the engagement on the videos. They turned out to be really, really popular, but really students' examples really using them. And there was one morning late in the semester, very cold morning lecture, and I had 30 there out of 250. And I was doing Gaussian elimination for the first time. That's a dreadful thing to do live anyway. And I did it, gave the class an example. I walked around. The 30 students who were there were starting to get it. It was going well, but I just thought, 220 weren't here today. So what do I do tomorrow? Do I go over it all again? Then I start to look at the analytics and I see these massive hits on the videos. So yes, they hadn't been to class, but they were still watching exactly what I had done, but at home or whenever in their own time. And I thought, you know what? I can't ignore this. I've got to I think I really want to try and offer them videos and do it in a way that they can do either or both. So I made a very conscious decision that from 2013, that year, students could either attend my lectures or just watch short videos or do both. And so that was my idea. But I thought, if I'm going to do this, I really want to gather the evidence because I want to see what those people are doing. I think as lecturers, if they're not sitting in front of us, at least with me, it was like they don't exist. They're not working. And I wanted to kind of avoid that pitfall. So I decided I would look at the data. So I've actually done 2 studies on this as we go through, but I'll talk about one in particular. So here's a rough thing of the module. I have about 3 lectures a week for 12 weeks. They're 50 minutes in duration. What I ended up making were 27 short pre-recorded videos. So these have an average length of about 7 minutes. So they're not in one-to-one correspondence with lectures. So I'm going to recommend a paper later on, but it really deals with lecture capture. So this is not lecture capture as such. This is more me pre-recording short videos around a topic or an example. The lectures then, I continue to do those as normal. I always try to put some little activity into my lectures if it's only 10 minutes where I'm asking students to do something. The thing that I was worried about, again, this might have been an irrational worry, but I thought, If the students are off watching videos, the one thing we don't want them to do is leave them all until the end of the semester and then do like binge watch like Netflix and just sit down and try to watch them all together. So what I decided was I'd set a deadline by which time the content had to be covered. And that deadline was a weekly quiz that was worth 5%. So I would hold a weekly quiz sort of 10 days after I'd covered the material. And that was your deadline by which you should have watched the videos, tried the problems, and come in and do the quiz. The quiz was in person, by the way. There were 10 in total. I chose the best 8. And then the final exam was worth 60%. And the key thing that I did here as well was also label everything using learning outcomes. So I can give you an example of this. And I wrote a paper there about the design of the module. So the study then was as follows. And this is just a theoretical framework that I thought really captured my philosophy behind this module. It may not be what you would use if you were teaching pure maths, but it's a really old model. It's by Carroll from 1963. And so most of you probably have heard of Bloom and Bloom's taxonomy and the learning outcomes, and there's usually a pyramid and there's various levels of learning outcomes of increasing cognitive ability. So Bloom built a lot on Carroll's work, but Carroll brings in this idea of time. And this is really what fascinates me. And I think it runs through a lot of the way I think about teaching. So this was his model. He put in 5 factors for learning. That the first thing he said was, you need to define a task to be learned. So be very clear about what the task is to be learned. That's not to say break everything down into tiny little steps. The task could be prove that, every differentiable function is continuous. That's not one of our learning outcomes, but be very clear about it. And then what about mastering that task? So for the individual, he talks about aptitude. And rather than think of it as how good you are at maths, he thinks about it in time. And he says, that's the amount of time that it's going to take that student to learn this task under optimal conditions. So if the student has very good prior maths achievement, short time. If they're not so good at maths, longer time. Then there's this, what he calls ability to understand instruction, and that's a bit hazy. So let's move on to perseverance. This is the amount of time that the learner is willing to engage on the task. So there's the time they need to engage in order to master, and then there's the time they're willing to engage in order to master. Then there's the external factors to the student. There's opportunity, which is the time that's allowed for learning. So there's 3 times in his model. And then there's quality of instruction. Now, he admits that that's a bit airy-fairy, but it's ideally the form of instruction so that the student won't require more time to mastery than their aptitude predicts. So it should be quality of instruction that allows them to master the task in the amount of time that their aptitude predicts, but it's time the whole way. And so this is just a rough graphic of kind of what I was doing. So we have week 1, we have our lectures, we have our videos, and I have a suite of learning outcomes. So you can come to class, you can watch the videos. I hand out a problem set. It too has the learning outcomes. But what the students will know is that whatever we covered in week 1 will be tested in week 3. So there's the time, the opportunity is nearly 2 weeks. For each student, there's the time that they're going to need to master, and then there's the time that they're willing to put in. And I suppose for those students who were weaker at maths, if you think about time, ideally you would hope they would come to the lecture, which is 50 minutes. If they work in the lecture, they still may need more time to understand. But what I want to do is increase their chance of persevering by making it very easy for them to spend that extra time. And that's where I think the videos come in. So for the weaker student, it's about, please come to class, please try to work through the 50 minutes, but then these videos are there to scaffold your learning for the rest of the time when you're out on your own. What I hadn't thought about initially was that for the more able students, 3 50-minute lectures a week is really boring. It's too long. They've seen some of it before. So for them, the shorter videos were a really efficient way to check if they knew what they were talking about. So I'll talk a little bit about the data we collected. So these were my research questions for the project I'm going to talk about. Which resources do students use when studying the content? So resources here, lectures, videos, and we also have a free drop-in Math Support Centre. But it turned out very few students used the Math Support Centre, so we removed that. How does the resources a student use impact the mark they get in the module? And then if we do see different patterns in resource usage, what are the reasons given by the students? Here's the data we collected. We had 522 students. This is the quantitative data. We collected attendance at lectures. We had collected video views. We collected Math Support Centre visits. We collected their marks, both the assessment, the final exam, and then the Leaving Cert grades in maths. They are the grades that the students have gotten in their high school, in their highest maths exam in high school before they come here. Of course, not all our students are Irish, but this was where we had grades, we collected those as well. And it turned out we used a statistical cluster analysis on this, and we got 4 clusters of users. So the majority were video users. So these were people who predominantly studied by using the videos, very little lecture usage. Then we had the lecture users. So these are the people who really solely just went to lectures and who really didn't engage so much at all with the videos. Then we had the dual users. So these were both video users and lecture users. And then we had the switchers. So the switchers were interesting. There was kind of 2 groups within the switchers. There were those who attended lectures for the first 5 weeks, say, and then switched and did the remainder of the semester using videos. Or they were the ones who came to the 2 lectures that were at good times, at nice times, but skipped 1 lecture every week, which was at an inconvenient time for them, say 9 on a Thursday or 4 on a Thursday. So they came to some lectures, avoided others, and when they avoided the others, they used the videos instead. So then here are the marks by cluster. And to be honest, I think, you know, when I look at these marks and I see the video users were the biggest group, yes, the average mark was lower than the average mark of the other 3 clusters, but it's also the biggest cluster, so 313 students. And the best, highest mark was by the lecture users, the ones who only used the lectures. And people say, yeah, that's great. That shows you must come to lectures to do well. I don't think it does. I think people who come to lectures, it's 3 lectures a week. You're coming in, you're present. There's a big factor, a motivation factor there. So I'm glad to see them doing well. The dual users did next best, and then the switchers were just a little bit above the video users. So they were the marks. Now, what we also did then was we put out a survey towards the end of the semester, and we wanted to gain qualitative data. And so what resource did you prefer, and what did you use? What did you have a preference, and what were your preferences? So we asked them 2 questions. In what ways do you believe that face-to-face lectures are beneficial for the module? And in what ways, if any, do you believe that videos are beneficial for the module? So we ended up with 121 students responded to that qualitative survey. And actually, they wrote quite a lot of stuff. They really engaged with the survey. So what we found was we matched the comments that we got with the clusters that we found. And the lecture users, and what they really liked was they liked the interactive environment in the lectures. They liked that they could talk to other students. They liked they could talk to the lectures, and they liked that they could work on problems with their friends. They really liked the fact that lectures are scheduled. And I think a lot of us saw that over COVID, that students were saying, you know, could you do a live lecture at our normal times? It helps us plan our week. They really trust that by coming to the lectures, they're going to be prepared for the assessments. And they really only used videos as a kind of a revision tool, if they were revising something and they wanted to refresh it. They didn't discuss the lecturer, they didn't discuss the pace, they didn't discuss the Math Support Centre or maximising the available time, which is actually, when we move to the biggest group, what was talked about. So the big thing amongst the video users was flexibility. I can cover the material at my own time and pace. I can pause, I can rewind, I can replay. There was a portion of the group who explicitly said videos were superior to lectures. And these were the ones who said efficiency, see time, maximizing time. The videos were more concise, less repetition, efficient, faster pace, and flexible. So you can see how they would appeal to the students, the higher performing ones whose aptitude was higher. They needed less time to mastery. This was a quicker way. There were also negative opinions of the lecture. And of course, what you see here is what you might expect. People said the lecturer was too slow in pace, and others said the lecturer was too fast in pace. So any of us who have taught maths to really big groups will know that we are only hitting sort of the middle group at best. They found it difficult to concentrate for the full lecture. They were scared to ask questions anyway, so what was the point in going? And they just felt the class was too big and impersonal. Now, had they known and had they stayed on till the end, the class went down to about 60 people, which was actually very personal. So that was the difference about it. The dual users, they generally like to come to lectures first. They used videos as refreshers or to clarify typical topics or to expand on notes. So they needed them in addition to the lectures. They described the videos as very clear, concise, straightforward, but then they discussed the engaging nature of the face-to-face lecture. They did have an idea that there was more in-depth coverage in lectures, so that they were getting, I guess the lecturer was there, so there was more of a response to them and more in-depth coverage. And they liked that you could learn maths gradually. For most of these, they were still describing the lectures as very fast-paced. So ideally, what I would love is that these dual users are those students that have the lower aptitude. They need the more time to mastery. The switchers, and I just really like this comment, they're beneficial when relating to complex topics. This is lectures, but they're wasted when dealing with simple process-oriented topics. So you think that if you need a video of how to fix the tap in your kitchen, like I needed a few weeks ago, you go to YouTube and somebody talks you through the steps. It's really helpful. You can pause it. And I think if you want to optimize a function or integrate a function, before when you learn, you need somebody to talk you through the steps. However, if the topic is quite complex, like it's a conceptual proof, there you may need somebody to engage with you on it. So it's a different type of thing. And I love this little graphic, because what you have here are the number of video views per week for each of the 4 clusters. And you'll see there's a spike every week. So I call these my little heartbeats of the course. The spike is, the quizzes were always on a Tuesday. So the spikes are on Monday and Tuesday morning. So the first one up in the top left-hand corner, they're the dual users. And then the top right-hand corner, they're the switchers. So you can see low engagement with videos. And then as the semester progresses, a lot of them switch to videos and start to use those. The bottom left is our lecture users. They only sporadically dip in. And what's really interesting here is you can see, I think it was around week 7, I was putting on something that was quite conceptual on the quiz. And you can actually see the difficulty of the topic relates to the number of peaks that week. And then on the right, you have the video users. So I think that's important if you're going to use videos, to keep this kind of data in mind. So just some reflections from myself, because I continued to kind of keep my little accounts. And there was 3 things that I noticed happening. But I didn't, sort of after the event, that's why I wrote about it, but when I looked at the accounts, my own personal accounts after the event, what I spotted was that there was a better atmosphere in lectures after I introduced the videos. So I'll explain. I used to have a lecture at 2 on a Monday. Packed. Everybody would come to that one because it was a Monday. I'm going to come to all my lectures. It's at 2 o'clock. I'm awake. Great. I will all come to class. And that class, I would generally be quiet up there. Stop talking up there. You be quiet. There was always lots of noise and chatter. And then I had 2 10 o'clock lectures, Tuesday and Thursday. And suddenly the attendance for each of those is way down. This was before I gave lecture, even before I had video, way down. Few serious students, you generally recognize the faces. But what happened when I introduced the videos is that those who used to show up on a Monday, I think out of guilt, they'd show up, but they couldn't follow anything because they hadn't been at the ones last week. So they just chat. And it was a social outing. But now they had videos, so they didn't need to come to those lectures anymore. So it actually became quite eerie in lectures in that the students who were coming to lectures were there to learn and were there to engage. So when you said, let's try a task, they all tried the task. When you walked around, they were all engaged. It was a very different sort of change. The other thing that I really liked was that, and I didn't realize it was going to do this, it places the responsibility back to the student. So what happened is our Math Support Centre, every Friday, it emails us, not the identity of the students who visited the centre, but it emails us how many students from our module came to the centre, how many sought help, what did they seek help with, and what did the tutors do to help them. So we get very detailed feedback. First week, I have my videos. Second week, maybe I have my videos. The quiz is coming. I get my email in and the Math Support Centre says, a student came and said they didn't know how to factor a quadratic equation. I explained everything to them and they went away happy. And I went, no. The video explains how to solve a quadratic equation. And these are first years, so they're coming from a very structured school environment. And now they're coming and you want them to learn how to learn. So I don't want them dropping in and somebody explaining. I want them to learn how to learn. So I said to the Math Support Centre, can you please tell all your students that, all your tutors, that if a student comes in and says, for Maths for Business, I don't know how to, you tell them, pull out the video, watch the video, and then ask me if you've any questions. So the Math Support Centre did that. And then the manager rang me and he said, well, the students now, some students came today, our tutors asked had they watched the videos and they said they had, but they still had no idea what was going on. And I said, okay, ask your tutors to ask the students, what video did you watch and at what point did you get stuck? Students stopped going to the Math Support Centre after that. So, and I made an announcement to my class, you're welcome to use the support centre, but if you go, please go and say, I got stuck at minute 6 or minute 3 minutes and 20 seconds in video 4.1. The other thing that I found was that it can be very difficult for a lecturer, and I think this might be what's happening to some of my colleagues. When you've taught for a very long time and you see very few people in front of you, you take it as an insult. It's, well, I'm working really hard here. I'm doing my best. Nobody's coming. How are they going to learn? And a few times I caught myself about to complain about poor attendance to colleagues. And then I'd have to go and I'd have to look at the virtual learning environment and go, no, wait, my students are working. It's just they're not sitting in front of me, but they're working. And I just put in, I think I put it in here. Let me just go back. This is just from this September. So this is a different course I teach. It's calculus for math students. And this was some of the feedback from our Math Support Centre. So this is what was written. The student came in, they said they needed help for almost all of activity sheet 1. This was a review. Functions, bijectivity, conjectures, graphing with GeoGebra. So the student comes in, haven't a clue, no idea. The student didn't know the definitions of injectivity, surjectivity. They just knew the horizontal line test from school. So this is what the tutor said. I explained, gave them some example and made them watch the video on the topics which they hadn't watched before this. They said the video was extremely helpful and worth watching afterwards. So I think particularly for first year students, it's a great way of putting the responsibility back on them. So let me just, I guess, reflect. I think what I would say is that I believe this way works for certainly for maths for non-mathematicians, more procedural courses. They might have diverse range of mathematical backgrounds. So I feel it takes into account the time it takes to master a task. I think videos are really good in maths courses that are generally focused on techniques. And I think they're very useful for large classes in particular, for all the reasons that I said so. Now, I'll just flip on to the very end. So I have my other study there. I suppose we did another study, and this was study 2, but we've just had a paper accepted on it recently. And this is where I look at what happens after a pandemic. And we looked across all our undergraduates. And I guess in the 5 minutes, is 5 minutes okay, Costas? Yeah, okay. I guess what we did here was when the pandemic hit and we had to flip, one of the things that kind of bothered me and my co-worker on this was that students generally have a preference for lectures or videos, and they'll extol the virtues of those. But when we had to flip, our students had 7 weeks face-to-face, and then they had to engage via online recordings. In most cases, in our university, they had to engage with recordings online, but it was the same lecturer, the same content, the same student. So I suppose we took advantage of this, and that we asked them at the end of that semester, before the pandemic hit, what type of format was your lecture? So was it traditional? Was it interactive? And can you rate how beneficial you found those lectures for your learning? After the flip, how beneficial was the online environment to your learning? And can you rate it? And then the questions in red, we also wanted to know those for our own staff. So we wrote a report on those. What we found actually in this instance was that if students found a lecture beneficial before lockdown, they generally found the recording more or less as beneficial afterwards. So actually, particularly in the instance, about 70% of our lectures were described as traditional in format. So kind of a one-way conversation. For the traditional lectures, most students said the recording was pretty good substitute for the traditional lecture. So I suppose you go through all of this, and I think, what do we know? If some of you would like further reading, there's a systematic review specifically on the use of lecture capture in maths undergraduates, and it's done by Lindsay and Evans. It's only recent. And to summarize, a lot of what we have said is in this lit review. Students are very positive about recordings. If given a choice, they generally have a preference for lectures or recordings. They use recordings in a number of ways: to revise, to review, to catch up, to make notes. The few studies that there are in undergraduate maths are generally on service modules like mine. And there are a few that they're pretty much inconclusive about attendance. I think only 7 deal with attendance. Some say there was a drop, some say there was no difference. And they're pretty mixed about attainment as well. So I think it's kind of, what do we know? They recommend making lectures more interactive or flipping the classroom. Do you know, I tried flipping the classroom this year and it was a total disaster. I think, you know, we do what we do well. We lecture for the most part. Most of us lecture. If you can capture that lecture, I say put it online. If students don't come, look at your VLE. Chances are they're watching it online. If you're afraid of them leaving it all as a box set and not watching the lectures, well, I would say, well, they don't come to lectures either. So give little assessments that make sure, give them that you must have it done by this time. So that would be I think our conclusion. Lindsay and Evans are more about how do we get them back into the class. I'm more, well, if we do traditional lecture, do it, but make the recording available. If we do interaction, a bit like what I do in the class, make maybe short videos or lecture capture and just cut out the bits where you're actually teaching. So on the end, I can make these slides available, Costas. I've got all of the articles that I spoke about. So maybe I'll leave it there and ask if there are any questions. Or
Thank you very much, Maria. Very, very, very nice presentation. I think that all of us will have shared some joint worries as you have presented. We will very much appreciate if you can send us, this presentation to be available to our ecosystem in the Athena European University and also to Hellenic Mediterranean University and all of us that we are here.
sure.
I have some questions, but first of all, I will provide the floor to the audience. Please use your virtual hand or switch on your microphone. I prefer the virtual hand in order to keep an order and provide the floor to the audience. So the floor is yours for any questions. I can see the hand of my colleague from Hellenic Mediterranean University, Professor Kavoulakis. George, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Kostas. Well, wonderful presentation. We all share your worries, about, but I wanted to ask you, do you think that instead of recording, when you say recording, you mean recording ourselves during the lectures, I guess?
So it's when I talk about recording, and I can show you an example, I get a kind of I make my slides with LaTeX and I use PDF, the LaTeX slides, and I would just maybe write down the problem, and then using my iPad, I just talk, I write and talk. So my face isn't on it and the students don't see me. They're just seeing the screen, the iPad, the slide with me actually doing out the maths on the slide. Lecture capture is where you're recording the lecture. So that's not what I was doing, but what I was saying, if I had used that method, I think what you can do then is you can always take it afterwards and just cut out the bits where you're teaching if you're worried about. So I guess if you've got, so other studies have shown that if you've got active learning in your class, in your lecture, and you use lecture capture, you record the lecture, students generally they don't find it so helpful, and it can be quite difficult to find things. So that's why I prefer my method. It's a lot of work the first time you do it, but then you save on time after that.
What if you simply make your notes available to the students? Do you think that would help at all?
I do that as well, yeah.
I see. But you think it's not equivalent to making the videos available? I mean, the videos are more helpful, you think?
No, I think lecture capture is good. I think what our other studies showed is that if you have a fairly traditional lecture and you have the recordings devices set up in your lecture theatre, then that is a perfectly good, and I'll say it, a perfectly good substitute for attending the live lecture.
I see. Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, George, for the questions, and Maria for the replies. Any other question from the audience? Okay, so let me ask you some questions, Maria. This semester we have tried exactly what you have described. So the flipped classroom with a pre-recording of the lectures, pre-recording of solved examples, multi-choice questions before they come to the classroom. But I would like to ask you a few questions about this. The results will be released, after the end of the semester. So the first question that I have for you is like, okay, you place the videos over there. You inform them that the videos are over there. The thing is like how to motivate the classroom to watch the videos.
So I am not flipping the classroom. So this is not a flipped classroom. And that's why I think it's attractive for practitioners. I'm still just lecturing. So I'm not asking the students to watch the videos before they come. I'm going in and I'm just giving a lecture, but I am also making videos available and saying to the students, I don't mind, you can come to the lecture or not come to any lecture. You can watch the videos, I don't mind. So I'm not changing the way I teach. I'm simply giving students a choice in two ways to engage. And I suppose the study was really to determine whether one way was inferior or superior for their learning. So I'm not flipping the classroom at all. And there's a really, really lovely paper by Lara Alcock, and it's in the London Mathematical Society, the bulletin of the London Mathematical Society. And what she is saying is that it's very difficult to flip your class. There's a lot of pitfalls. You probably found this. And maybe what we should do instead, as she calls it, tilting the classroom, just lecturing in a traditional way, but with kind of enhanced, bells and whistles. Because I tried to flip my own class as well this year, and I just found I got it all wrong. Some students weren't watching it. Some were saying it was way too much work. Some were, it didn't work. So this isn't a flipped classroom. This is something different.
So Maria, I have a comment on this answer now.
Yeah.
This is my second, like a question that just generated from your reply. Within, and I totally agree with you, and this is the tendency of the new era of the higher education, that it should be student-centered, and student-centered gives the responsibility for the students how to handle their learning.
Yes.
And you mentioned this during your lecture. So by flipping the classroom, or however by flipping the classroom in order to have the definitions, you are providing them the responsibility of the learning, because you should go, and this is how market works, or how the real life works. You should do a few things. There are some requirements. This is the way that you should be trained. You should go over there, follow, come or not come is your responsibility. The videos are there, but when you will come to the classroom in order to enhance my learning, I would like to do activities or more advanced, or answer questions only. So by coming to the classroom, this was the way that we tried this semester. I was not lecturing. I was just asking, how many questions do you have? And I thought, what did I found is like I could do more than the time that I was requiring to cover the lecture by answering the questions. Okay. So by flipping the classroom, I don't think so that you prohibit, the people that they are not coming to follow the lectures, but they are missing, the deeper or the more engaging part. All right. So flipping the classroom, I think, combines, one more element. According to what did you say? They are learning how to learn. They learn how to work in real life. The responsibilities there themselves. They will go, and when they will come to the classroom, they should fulfill the requirements that, probably in the future someone will set them. And, and also, I think that very correctly you mentioned within the class, you have students that they lack knowledge, but you have also students that they are motivated to learn. By following the flipped classroom and during the lecture time, starting to lecture only by questions and moving to more advanced problems, you are keeping also, you are fair to the students that they are motivated. Otherwise, if you are going to do the same, the students, they will say, okay, I have the videos, I will come to the lecture, I'm boring. So you are missing them, in my opinion. So what is your comment on this?
That I'm missing the students that
the flipped classroom approach, by doing more advanced activities and by asking, you are keeping the students that they are motivated.
Well, I guess, again, what I was doing wasn't flipped, in that I wasn't doing I was doing an activity in class, but it was really just, it was like, and I think this is the difference. This is why I'm kind of talking about service courses in particular, because you've got students for whom it's very simple. So they don't need to come to class and do the activity. They don't need that extra thing to learn. They're fine by the videos. They can learn by themselves. What you're hoping, though, that the students who are weaker will come to class because they will need the extra activities.
Exactly.
So that was my rationale. And I wasn't doing additional material as in content. I was just doing more of the material to help them to learn in the class. So it wasn't so much flipped. And then I think what was helping, or what was a clear indicator back to the students, was if you've got a quiz every week, and it was about a 15-minute written quiz worth 5%, that is your indicator to tell you whether the way you are engaging with my module is working or not. So if you're getting 1%, then it's up to you to come to me and say, why am I getting 1%? What do I need to do? If you are getting 5% and you're not coming to any of the lectures, that's great. And I found the quizzes really were a very strong predictor of the mark that the students would get in the final written paper.
And you know, the second question is that you mentioned that you have 3 to 12 quizzes, 5% each one of them, you know, and then you select the 8 best quizzes in order to correspond to the 40%, and then the final exam is 60%.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah.
So, all right. So, all right. I go. So this 5% each, where does it go?
How do you mean? Where do?
I missed something. If someone is going to do all the quizzes, you select the
I only take their best 8.
The best 8. Okay.
Yeah.
Best 8. All right. And I have a final question, because I can see my Professor Fuskitakis has a question. You mentioned, and this is a very big challenge, the fear of them to ask questions, however open you are. However, you are mentioning all the time that there are no stupid questions. You know, they don't. Only few of them they ask questions.
Yeah.
How do you overcome this? What is your strategy?
So I'm because I would be quite shy myself, and I don't like hosting a big whole class discussion. So I often find that the questions, and I try to do this, that it becomes a bit of a habit, that I will wait as long as possible after the lecture, and a line will form, and I could be 20 minutes, half an hour after a lecture. And then I would take those questions that I'm getting there and bring them into the class the next day and say, look, here's some things people have been asking me. Or I'll often find if I do stop and I walk around the class and I kind of, you know, the way you sum it up, you go, a few of you are making that mistake, a few of you are making that mistake. So then I bring those down to the front and say, look, in my walk around there, these were the kind of things I've seen. Some of you might have done that. So it's more, I try to do it kind of one-on-one quietly, and then bring them back as a whole class. You know, somebody asked me this.
So I think that I'm doing a mistake, because what I'm telling them when I'm waiting, and indeed some of them they are coming, I'm telling them, you know, ask, you know, after the break, because your question could be a question of many, many people. So if I will reply this question one, I'm missing, you know, the people that probably they had this question and they don't even ask during the break.
Yeah.
So yes, indeed, I have observed this, you know, in a break or after the lecture, you know, a lot of people are coming.
Yeah.
Correct. So I will give the floor to George.
Thank you very much for your excellent presentation. Kostas, let me share my experience. It was my first attempt to use the flipped classroom approach this semester for an elective course. This is a minus in this case, because I had a very small number of participants. I started the flipped classroom approach, but after a couple of weeks, the procedure collapsed. They obliged me to turn to the classical approach. Maybe when you have a lot of students, if you teach courses at the first semesters where you have a lot of students, then it is much easier to apply the flipped classroom approach, even if I love it.
I disagree with you.
It's very nice.
You're doing a principal mistake, in my opinion, because flipped classroom involves online and face-to-face. They cannot oblige you. Why did they oblige you? You make the videos?
No, I just had 4 participants in the class, and they hadn't watched the videos, so I couldn't discuss with them anything. They didn't follow the procedure, so I couldn't go to the next step.
George, in Aalborg University, that the BBL has been obliged to all the universities by the state, not by individuals, by you, by me, or by Maria. It took for them 2 years in order, to make the students to accommodate with this. So it needs a patience, but you should persist it. If you have decided to work like this, they will learn later on. So not the first attempt, you should be consistent on this.
This summer semester, I have a course. It's an obligatory course. So I am expecting many more participants. This time I will insist.
Insist.
And maybe the flipped classroom approach can be, let's say, in parallel with making some more videos. So for those who don't want to participate in the flipped classroom approach, they will have the possibility, even with shorter videos, to follow the course. But for those that will follow the flipped classroom approach, this is going to be very powerful because they will have the opportunity to ask questions, to go to a further step.
Correct.
I think that's important to remember, that students do have preferences, and it's not a fake thing. Some prefer to attend a lecture, some prefer to speak, some prefer to do it at home. So I'm always very hesitant when I hear that, somebody like a university has obliged everybody to do something, because I think so much is dependent on the content, the number of students, the level of the students. I think there's so many factors. We can't just say one way of teaching is the best. But what I will do, Costa, is I'm going to send you on the link to Lara Alcock's paper about tilt in the classroom. It's provocative.
My comment on this is everything is like physics. It's like thermodynamics. If you change something, it takes time for the system to stabilize. So what I would like to say to George, and I totally agree with you, that obligation to academia is like against, the philosophy. The people, they should be free to select and accommodate. What I would like to show to George, because George, he's one that he would like to innovate his teaching, is like, it takes patience. It was an extreme example that I gave to you. Even if you have the backup of a university, even if this is a decision, the system takes time in order to stabilize to something new. So imagine how more difficult it is for an individual to change the way of teaching, where all the others, they are using something else. And the students, they should change, their preferences or to learn, because do we know if we are successful to learn them how to learn? I don't know if we are successful on this. So this is what I would like to say to George as an example, that we should be persistent if we think, and then we should adapt, but I think that, as an individual, as a mature people, we have a better picture of, or not a better picture, but, we have a better view of the big picture in order to help the young people if we think to go, to learn better, or they will tell us.
Kostas, I am decided to even adapt myself, meaning that I will try and I will insist on flipped classroom, but I will still leave some time for the classical approach with videos, accompanied with shorter videos, just to make the transition smoother.
Yeah, correct. This is correct. I will give the floor, Dimitris. I think that you're a gentleman. I will provide the floor first to the ladies, since Stella has raised her hand as well. Do you agree?
Thanks.
Okay.
I don't mind. I can wait. Dimitris, you can go. You can go
No, I
first.
think I'm the moderator. So,
Maria, thanks a lot. It was a really incredible talk. I really enjoyed it, and it's really a pleasure to see an Athena talk on education. So my question is on whether you use drop-in sessions by somebody else, where students can drop in and ask questions. And I'm mostly interested because when you have video recordings of your courses, this does not necessarily mean that your students are qualitatively engaged with the videos. I mean, they can flip the videos, but without really understanding.
Yeah.
So, a drop-in session, I mean, I've used it in the past in the UK, and it was really helpful. I have not been using video recordings myself, but when I teach, especially when I teach programming, music programming, I upload all material in pictures, snapshots. I don't upload the code itself because I want the students to make the effort to reproduce them at least. And this year I've used like an elder student who has passed the course before to assist the younger ones, because he's the one who might better understand what the problems are. And they also feel more relaxed in asking questions while I'm not around. So my main question is on drop-in sessions.
So we do exactly that. So the quizzes were on a Tuesday, and what we would do on the Monday afternoon. So we have our math support center, but I feel when you drop into the math support center, you know, you can get anyone, they're very good. But so I would hold my own dedicated drop-in center from 3 to 6 on a Monday afternoon. And I teach another module, which is called peer-assisted tutoring. So that would be to our 3rd and 4th year math students. It's an option. And they come in and then they act as tutors as part of the module for our 1st year. So they are undergraduates themselves. And then exactly for what you say, I feel they are so much better than us because the students aren't afraid to talk to them and they can say anything to them. And we would find, so I would keep data for the drop-in centers or for the drop-ins as well. It could be quite low, but then there would be a week where the quiz was on something quite complicated and you might get 40 come to the drop-in center. So what they would mainly come to the drop-in center, you see, I would also have problem sets. So the idea is that they would have to do these problem sets and the quiz would be based on those. So I certainly think there were some students who came to me at the end and said, I failed your course, but I watched all your videos. And the first year I realized they were doing exactly that. They were putting them on and they were sitting back and watching them. Whereas of course you want them to do and engage. And so I really tried to emphasize that afterwards the next year. It's not about watching them. It's about you engaging with them. And actually, when we wrote that paper, one of the referees, we said something about engaging with the videos and they got really quite annoyed. They said, no, you've no evidence of them engaging. You have evidence of them watching. So I think that was something then we really tried to encourage them to do. So that way we kind of, I felt the dedicated drop-in was better because it also allowed me to capture where the difficulties were. But I didn't do it. It was my undergraduates who did it.
Maria, I think that if you are going to upload your videos through the Moodle or the Blackboard, because you have the learning analytics of the individual, you can see how long a person has spent with the video, how many times the person has watched the video. Because if you are going to do this through the YouTube, you just see the views.
Yeah, so this was a while back and we were using something called Blackboard. We're using Brightspace now. So at the time we could see the number of times the students viewed the video, but we couldn't see the length of time they spent on it. So that wasn't in our analytics.
I think that with Moodle, you have this learning analytics.
But I think with Moodle, it's probably better. Yeah.
So let me give the floor to Professor Christakis. Dimitris, the floor is yours and thank you.
Thank you, Kostas, and thank you, Maria. It was a very pleasant experience, your presentation, and I think that all of us have learned a lot from you. I want to ask you something before that. I want to express my opinion on your presentation. I think that you posed all the materials you have given to us on two main axes. The first one was the structure and the method of teaching mathematics, and the second was the big question of how to make the students to love what we are giving to them. Not only in the field of mathematics, but in general. So if a student has the will to attend and learn, then it is our job to find the best way to make the flow of the material as more harmonic and beautiful as we can. So this could be seen as a product. Let me express it in mathematics. The product of two vectors, the will of the students and the structure of our teaching.
Yeah.
Of course, those vectors are not ordinary vectors. They may be seen as tensors in very high number of dimensions. What I want to say with all those abstractions I'm doing on the subject of teaching and the subject of the students' will, the students' decision to learn. The reason why I'm proposing those abstractions is that I believe that teaching is a very concrete subject, and we should attend it. We should examine this procedure as a concrete mathematical entity.
Mhm.
An entity that has not only the identities of numbers and geometrical features, etc., but it has a more general, more abstract existence. So maybe teaching and socializing in general has a more has a need for a more abstract, beyond the ordinary mathematics examination and posing. That means that mathematics is not the most abstract way of thinking. And I do not want to put beyond mathematics the so-called philosophy. The word philosophy is very much well tired. So what I propose is to think about a meta-mathematics, maybe. I don't know if the term meta-mathematics says something, but of course, what your example, your presentation focused on those two axes, the will and the structure of teaching, the will of the students and the structure of our teaching could produce what is the product of those two tensors.
Mhm.
What I want to say in the end of my speech is that both will and structure have an extension, have an intention, and have also a contention. Three words with the second component, tension. That's why I'm calling tensor the product of those two entities. The will of the student and the structure of our teaching. That is my present for you.
I think that's a very nice way of summing it up, actually. The will of the student and then the structure, and it's almost like if the student, I guess as well, if the student is willing from the start, it's great. But if we only have lectures and the student decides in week 3 or 4, like the prodigal son, I want to come back to the class. I want to be able to give them as many ways to catch up and to access it. Or there's a week where they party all week and they haven't been to class. Well, keep coming back. I'm going to provide you with a structure that allows you to easily find what you missed when you weren't there. Mm-hmm. And in that way, I think, so some people say you're spoon feeding the students. I say, no, I'm just giving them different avenues to engage with the material, and then it's up to them. I found in the past, way back when I first started teaching, when you wouldn't even have notes available, students could say, I missed it, I'm really sorry. And then I would sit with them and I would go through things at my desk because I would feel bad. And I just think there's no need for that. If they did, so I think the way you've summed it up is lovely. Very, very nice. I think you're on mute, Costas. You're on mute.
Sorry, I'm sorry, my mistake. So I would like to thank you very much for this incredible talk. I will stop. I would like to thank you a lot. I'm looking forward to receiving from you your presentation and also the papers. You gave me an excellent idea that I think that we should invite you to HMU, as soon as possible. I think that
Great.
we should create, I mean, this is something that I'm going to work, because I really like this, an international week, how to teach and how to learn for professors, academics, and students. Is something that I think that this is an excellent topic to organize. You are going to be among the first one that we are going to invite, among other colleagues that we know.
I could talk all week. I could talk all week on this topic.
Yeah, excellent. And I think that it's something that we should prioritize immediately.
Super.
So thank you. We are looking forward for the material. Thank you, all of you. And we had, more people that they left already. I think that they had commitments. This is an example of an excellent talk. You are with us more than 1 hour, something like 1 hour and 20 minutes.
Well,
the Athena talks we are going to update tomorrow. Tomorrow we have a more, let's say, material. We have a speaker from the University of Vigo from Spain. I will send you the announcement because I don't remember right now what is the topic. I remember it's a female scientist, but I will inform you later on. Thank you and bye-bye.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
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 Thanks.